Since the tragic deaths of Darnell and Amila Curry on February 10th, it's been a difficult time for the whole city. I asked the Deputy Mayor, Malia Howard and Julie Schneider, to do a report in 2 weeks to explain how this could happen in the system and what steps we could take to make sure it doesn't happen again. I want to start by thanking the Deputy Mayor Malia Howard. In addition to working on this report, which is available to the media today and we post it online as we speak, she was with the Williams Curry family every step of the way, as well as Darrell Woods, but that meant everything from finding clothes, transportation, going through the details of the funeral, up to accompanying them to their new home yesterday. I know it was emotionally extremely difficult thing, but Malia, you handled it with grace, represented the city well, and when she wasn't with the Williams and Curry family, she's been in Southwest Detroit, passing out supplies to the people in need there, and still got this report done. Julie Schneider, our great housing director, is shaken as everybody was who has been working on this with the death of these children. And as she went to work on the report, she did not expect to deal with a massive water main break, and she arranged to house 200 families in a hotel overnight, something we've never tried at that magnitude, and has done a great job. And also, I got this. And Julie, thank you for what you're doing. February has been an extraordinarily trying time. In the report, there are basically 3 sections. I'm going to summarize them for you, and you can read the full detail. But the first question is how this could happen, and you have to start with an explanation of the system. And the most stunning statistic that they show is that 76% of all the calls that come into the CAM system, which is our hotline system, come from people who are housed. And this is something that isn't very widely understood, but homeless are people who live on the street, but under federal definitions, homeless are also individuals who lack fixed and regular places to sleep. So if you are sharing housing with another because of economic hardship, you are defined as homeless under federal law. And folks who are living on somebody's couch or shortly with a relative, those are the large number of calls that are coming into the CAM system. And Detroiters have such big hearts. A couple of weeks ago, I was with a young man who had 2 daughters who were working to get into a training program for a job, and I said, "Where are you staying?" And he said, "I got put out of my place. I'm staying with my cousin's friend." And I thought, that is the most Detroit statement. This city has such a big heart. And your cousin and his daughters need a place to stay, and you have a friend with extra bedrooms, and you ask them to open their doors. That is most of what the CAM network is doing. And you've had some media reports that says there are long wait lists for shelter beds. That's true, but those are almost entirely people who are housed at the time of the call. And the CAM network has a challenge every day in figuring out who is in imminent danger of being pushed out and who you could make arrangements with to stay in their current housing. And so I recognize this problem. As I said last winter, the Detroit police told me because of this, what I would call bottleneck in the CAM system, there were times when the Detroit police would pick up somebody unsheltered from the street and not have a place to take them. I said, that is unacceptable. Any person who is on the streets of this city and needs shelter and wants it, I want to have a system in place that shelter is immediate. That was the challenge I gave to the housing department, and I told them by the winter of 2025, I want a system in this city that every single person who is on the street and wants and needs housing has immediate access. And what Julie Schneider and City Council did to accomplish this was take a number of steps. On July 1st, we doubled the budget for homeless in the city from $6 million to $12 million. Historically, the city of Detroit used its $6 million in federal money to fight homelessness. This July 1st, for the first time, $6 million of city money went on top to double the contribution. That had an increase of an immediate 248 regular shelter beds. But what they did was so critical, was they did what they asked. They set up an immediate shelter system of 110 beds. And they made the winter deadline on December 16th. They opened up two immediate shelter centers, drop-in centers, one with 75 beds for families with women and children, one with 35 beds for single men. And they put outreach people on the street 24 hours a day. And between the coordination with the Detroit police and the outreach folks from the housing department, literally every day, we had staff looking at all the regular places where you normally find the homeless. And we touch base with these homeless regularly. And the truth is, there are a lot of folks who choose to stay on the street, as everybody who's active in this area knows, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's an addiction issue, whether they had a bad experience with a shelter, whether they don't like rules. There are a lot of reasons people choose not to accept shelters. And on a particularly cold day, we touch base again because they may change that decision. We had in place on December 16th an immediate shelter system for the first time and as far back as we have records, with a shelter system that didn't turn anybody away and a 24-hour outreach team. And the heart-breaking aspect of this is that we never had contact with Ms. Williams or her family after November 25th. She did not know that the immediate shelter system had gone into place. Our outreach teams were looking in the usual places. They were not looking for somebody living in a van in parking structures. This is something that is going to be hard to accept for a long time, that we had the beds in place. The team did go back and look at the history of the contacts. We didn't ask the Williams-Curry family for statements for legal reasons, but what I'm about to share with you is derived entirely from the homeless department's networks, and is very similar to what I reported the first time. The first reported contact we have with the family is in 2022. It wasn't for shelter, it was for a rent assistance program. The first contact we have seeking shelter was in December of 23, when Ms. Williams called and indicated the place that she was living was no longer available, and she thought she may need a shelter bed. In December of 23, the family was offered a temporary shelter bed, and the records from that shelter indicate they did not use it. Whether they were there for a day or not, I'm not sure. They don't record until the second day, but there's no indication they used it, and as we learned later, the family found other housing. What the homeless team did correctly was in March, April, and May, reach out to the family to see what was the situation, and got no response. At the time, to the best of our knowledge, they were housed. In the summer of 2023, as I indicated before, Ms. Williams again reached out to inquire about shelter. She indicated she did have housing at the time. She did not think it was going to last long, and asked about shelter beds, and there were conversations about where they might be housed. As we again now know, the family found other shelter with a friend and stayed there through the summer and the fall. On November 25th, the last contact we have, Ms. Williams called the CAM hotline and said, where I have been staying in the summer and the fall, I don't believe is going to be available. I don't know where I'm going to go. I asked the question the first time why this wasn't classified as an emergency, but as you look at the records, the time of the call, the call take worker put them in a class of somebody who was still housed, but did indicate they expected to be unhoused within 14 days, and did not send one of our outreach workers out to assess the situation. And so what we now know is this, that the family was sleeping in a van in casino parking structures. Nobody from the homeless team ever reached out again to inquire as to their status. None of our police officers or outreach workers ran across, as far as we have records, the Williams-Curry family, but of course they were not going through parking structures. That was not part of the protocols at the time. And so we have a terribly tragic situation that this city set up an immediate shelter system on December 16th. The Williams-Curry family never learned of the new service available, and we did not learn of their status living in the van. This cannot ever happen again. There is no point in having an immediate shelter system if the people who most need it don't know about it. And so what Deputy Mayor Howard and Director Schneider have put forward is a 7-point plan to make sure this tragedy doesn't happen. And I am immediately adopting their 7-point plan, and I've already started conversations with City Council, and I know there will not be any problem with support. But here's what we're going to do. First, when there are emergency calls to the CAM system, even if somebody is still housed with minor children, there will be an on-site visit from an outreach worker. We want that outreach worker to, you cannot, when you're just dealing with phone calls, understand how close somebody is to being out. Do they have a family who's going to help them or not? We need to have those outreach workers on site in meeting those families, and going forward, we will require that site visit. Second, Chief Bettison has directed the Detroit Police Department's unsheltered team to pay special attention to finding families in vehicles, and the outreach team will do the same. It was not a conscious effort to seek out vehicles and see if folks were living inside, but what we have learned in the last 2 weeks is we have other families out there living in vehicles, and we've already responded to a number of them, but looking for families in vehicles will now be a focus of the police department. Third, we're expanding the hotline for 24-hour emergency assistance. While it may not have made a difference in the Williams and Curry case, there are times people find themselves unexpectedly on the street at night. We have not operated this line outside of business hours, and now no matter what time you call, you will be connected to our emergency outreach people who will come out and assist. Fourth, we're doubling the number of drop-in beds from 110 to 220. With the attention this case has gotten, there is now much more awareness of the immediate shelter system, and it's terrible that it took a tragedy to raise that awareness. We have not turned anybody away this winter, but we can see that we are going to need to add capacity. And so I will be proposing to City Council in tomorrow's budget presentation a 40% increase in the general fund contribution to homelessness, an extra $2.4 million. And we will double the number of drop-in beds available for immediate shelter in the city. Fifth, we're expanding the night outreach teams. We went to 24-hour coverage this fall. Now we're putting a second team on that late night shift so that we can cover more of the city and make it far more likely we would find somebody in a place that isn't the normal place that we would look. Sixth, we're going to continue using the police precincts as safe havens. And in the last 2 weeks, this has been a remarkable success. And I will say again to the residents of the city, all of this stuff may sound confusing. Or if you have a friend who's unexpectedly on the street at night and you don't understand the telephone numbers in the system, go to your police precinct. They will be a safe haven. I had a mayor of another Midwestern city call me 2 weeks ago when I said to the people of Detroit, if you're in a homeless emergency, go to your police precinct. And that mayor said to me, that'll never work. Homeless people try to avoid police. They'll never voluntarily go to a police precinct. I said, you don't know the relationship between the city of Detroit and the police department. 25 people in the last 2 weeks who were having a homeless emergency went to their police precincts and were taken to shelters and got the service. And so we are going to continue to use the police precincts under Chief Bedison's direction as a safe haven, and everybody should stay conscious of that. And then finally, we're going to expand our communication. The media in this room extensively covered when we opened the immediate shelter centers on December 16th, but that is not where many of the people who need the service are getting their information. We are going to be in gas stations and bus stops and those kinds of locations with this information, with the 24-hour number, and do a much more intensive job of making sure that nobody again can ever be unaware of the services that this city has made available. That is the summary of what they've done. I'm going to ask the two authors of the report to take a few minutes, and then their partner, Chief Bedison, to talk about the way the Detroit Police Department has integrated into this. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Housing Director, Julie Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon. We are now a little over 2 weeks from the tragedy of February 10th. Certainly, like all of you, I was deeply impacted by the deaths of these two children. We vowed to understand the circumstances around Ms. Williams' interaction with the homelessness system, identify changes that we could make to prevent such tragedies in the future. Myself and my team have worked with dozens of people within the last 2 weeks to gather information for this report and put the 7-point plan together that the mayor went over in detail just a few moments earlier. I want to thank all of those who responded to this moment to provide information, to provide input, and mobilize changes that we've already made. With respect to Ms. Williams' calls to the helpline and CAM, I reviewed information of several calls that came in between December 2023 and November of 2024. It was in December of 2023 that the first outreach for shelter occurred. The next calls from Ms. Williams came in the summer of 2024, in June and July specifically, during which she reported that she was temporarily residing in housing at that time. The final call from Ms. Williams came in November of 2024, during which Ms. Williams requested shelter and stated that she was living in temporary housing but would likely have to leave soon. Given that CAM and the homelessness system prioritize unsheltered households and the drop-in shelter had not yet come online, shelter was not provided at that time. We have made significant changes within the last year to the homelessness system. We've added shelter beds, we've achieved 24-hour outreach, we've added standby shelters for extreme weather, we've added the drop-in shelter as well. That occurred on December 16th, or about 3 weeks after the last call from Ms. Williams. We know these changes have helped people. When I was out doing outreach a couple of weeks ago, or about a month ago, with the unsheltered count, I spoke to several people and we were able to transport them to the drop-in shelter. I was at a shelter this morning talking to residents of that shelter about the importance that shelter was providing in their life and how it had saved several of them. Yet I know, based on conversations with those people, with our outreach staff and workers, that those changes were not enough and we need to do more. Since the events of February 10th, we have already taken steps to prevent this tragedy and will continue to do so in the coming weeks. We've changed the helpline and CAM to make sure that if people are experiencing a housing crisis after hours, they can connect to an outreach team who can respond to them We've added shelter capacity through our drop-in shelter, through our drop-in beds that we're already adding shelter space to those drop-in shelters. We'll also be increasing our communication efforts, as the mayor mentioned. We need to make sure that we are in places where people who are experiencing housing crises are, and they can get the information immediately, and they understand how they can easily make connections with the homelessness system and get the help that they need. I look forward to working with my team to implement these changes. I also look forward to working with the Homeless Action Network of Detroit, or HAN, and the COC as we try to bring these important changes to Detroiters. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Deputy Mayor Malia Howard.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Julie and Mayor. So the loss of the Curry children is something, as we have stated, can never happen again, and should never have happened. When a family reaches out for help and they're in the midst of a crisis, it is our job, our duty, to provide them with those services that they need. And so in this particular moment, when this tragedy happened, of course, the family was not reached back out to. And that is something that we are changing. As the mayor and Director Schneider have let you know, we are literally going to be calling families back, making sure that families are touched. If you call in and need assistance, and again, we are prioritizing families with children, but if you're a family and you are out there on the street, if you are living in your car, please call the 866-313-2520 number. It is critical. We will get you the services that you need and the services that you deserve. We never want to see this happen again. And so I want to say that in the 2 weeks that I've spent, well, actually it's been 3, that I've spent with the Williams Curry family, really being able to see this family's resilience and this family's determination to turn over from this chapter of their lives, to turn over a new leaf and to move forward has just been astonishing. The fact that they really have embraced myself and Commissioner Woods, and we're working with them together to create a family action plan for them so that they can move out of this tragedy and move forward into their lives, making sure that we provide them with the educational and workforce development training that they need so that they can sustain themselves moving forward is critical. And so we are here to support them, but we are also here to support all of our residents. And so if you need assistance, we are really imploring you to reach out so that we can make these connections and ensure that no family ever has to go through this again. We as a city, we take pride in this. We help each other, as Mayor has stated. We open our homes to each other. I've had more than 50 phone calls of people offering support for the Williams Curry family with their homes and making sure that, again, that this never happens. And so it's my duty and job to connect the housing department with those folks who actually have homes that they can rent out or lease out or provide for immediate shelter. The outpouring for this family was so strong, and I want people to know that, right? Because, we're past, the funeral, we're past the family moving in, but I want people to know that there are so many people who reached out to us who wanted to support them. And so in that outreach, I want to make sure that I connect them with the housing department, because if we have families who are still, and we know this, I want to make sure that they have housing, right? And make sure that we connect all of these tendrils together, and then we connect folks with Detroit at Work and with workforce development training, because that's how they're going to sustain themselves moving forward. And so it's those wraparound services, not just from the city, but from DPSCD, from DWIN. Thank you to CEO White for providing us with grief counseling and mental health counseling for the family. So it's those wraparound services that are going to continue to allow this family to move and grow and be all that they wanted to be before they got into this crisis. And so I just want to thank everyone for their support in the city and around the country that reached out with open hands to help the family. With that, I want to thank you all. I appreciate you, and I want to turn it over to Chief Bedison.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Howard, and thank you, Chair Commissioner Woods and Commissioner Bernard, who from the Board of Police Commissioners have been standing with me and standing and with us with this. But just really want to thank the men and women of the Detroit Police Department for the way that they've really just stepped up. From my command officers who've pushed down through administrative messages and actually going to the roll calls and making sure that each and every member of the Detroit Police Department understands our role. And so, as the mayor has already stated, that our precincts will remain open for any individual that's homeless. In the Detroit Police Department, we call them unsheltered. That's the politically correct term. And so for all of our unsheltered population and for our unsheltered response team officers and for all of our neighborhood police officers as well, we now will be on the lookout and going through and giving special attention to all of the parking garages. We have a gaming division as well, but unfortunately, that was one of the things we weren't looking out for when it comes to individual in cars. We're all familiar with our unsheltered population that's typically on the streets or in other situations, but now to the community as well. This situation has made us all really a lot more aware of to have extra eyes and ears. So when it comes to whether it's a parking lot where individuals typically will be in a vehicle and where they feel safe, our neighborhood police officers, the men and women of DPD, will be looking out and utilizing the media as well so that we can train folks too to be those extra eyes and ears when it comes to being able to make us aware of an individual that's living in their vehicle. And so some of the things to look out for, you may look into a car and you may think that it's a person that may be a hoarder, or, why does this person have so many things in the vehicle? You may not think that they're actually living in the vehicle, but now we come to know that so many people are living in their vehicles, and a vehicle is not meant to be resided in. There's safety issues that go along with it. It could be carbon monoxide, trying to run the vehicle to keep it warm. It's a lot of other safety hazards and concerns. I put that out to you just to say that we're up to the task, the men and women in DPD, in our precincts, based off our community relations and our excellent relationship with the community. Our unsheltered population does not have an issue with coming into a police precinct, and so 25 individuals did, since we started the program, have came in, and our officers immediately connected them to outreach workers who came to the precinct to get them into shelter. Also, our police officers, since this incident, have been out there on the streets, and they identified 61 individuals that were unsheltered, and our unsheltered response team, connected them with outreach and actually transported them to drop-in centers so that they, during this brutal winter, would be in a warm environment. So we will continue this. We will step it up, and we pray and hope and know that this community will not have this occur again. At this point, we'll open it up for questions.
Hi, thank you so much. Nusrat Rahman here with the Detroit Free Press. I had a couple of questions, the first of which is clarification on the extension of the helpline and the CAM line. I know you mentioned, maybe I missed this, is it going to be 24/7 or 24 hours Monday to Friday? What about the weekends, and is this going to be indefinite?
So the CAM work has to work hand in hand with the outreach teams. So if people call and there's not outreach teams available, then and there's not shelter beds, then a 24-hour phone line won't be effective. So what we're doing is expanding all of that work. So we're making sure that people calling after hours are able to connect to an outreach team where they're experiencing a housing crisis. That outreach team will connect with them, will go to them and get them to our drop-in shelter. So we're expanding all of that work, and so we want to make sure that people are able to engage with the outreach team. Yes, it is. Yes.
24/7?
Yeah.
And do we know, is that indefinite, like, or is there like? It's permanent. And do we know how that's going to be funded?
We have the general fund allocation, and that will be funded through that.
Okay, and I also did want to ask a little bit more about, so there's a lot of conversation about, the entry versus, getting people into the system, but also what happens afterwards. Maybe you get into a shelter, but then what happens afterwards, right? The conversation about affordable housing. Has the administration and partners talked a little bit more about what happens after a person gets out of shelter, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, the housing choice vouchers? Like, what's that side of the long-term solution here?
Well, that has been a part of our work for the last 10 years. I mean, we've worked tirelessly to add affordable housing, add supportive housing. We'll continue to do that. We have added staff just recently to make sure that we're building more supportive housing. We have staff members who are now focused solely on building supportive housing. We've also added staff to do what we're calling rapid shelter exit. And that is for households that can be self-sufficient, but just need some help in the interim. And so we have staff now who are working to help people get out of shelters quickly, get back on their feet, make sure they're getting those wraparound services. So those are all things that we've both been doing, but all things where we recognize that we need to increase and do more of, and we're mobilizing to do that now.
And then the last question I had was, I understand that the city assisted with getting a home for the family, and officials were present at the funeral services, and there's been a lot of support from the city. I wonder if you can kind of clarify, the city's role and relationship with the mother and the family following this tragedy. Is the city representing them? Is there a formal agreement of some sort? Can you kind of clarify the relationship?
No, there's no formal agreement. It's compassion and kindness and love. That's the agreement. So we're making sure that, as with any resident, right? So I used to be, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go off tangent real quick. I used to be the District 5 manager. This is the work that I did as the District 5 manager, making sure I'm connecting people to resources, right? Out of compassion and kindness, not out of a job. And so that's what we've done with this family. And so there's no formal agreement. It's just love and compassion.
And then the house, I wonder if you can just tell me a little bit more about that. I know that the family was able to get a home. Was this a partnership with any other organizations?
Yeah, I'm gonna have Mr. Woods take that.
Thank you.
Yes, because he was the lead there.
It was a partnership. We have done this before when we have saw a family struggling in this area, and we responded to the need. Thank you for Chad Aldy and the Detroit Rescue Mission, who we have partnered up with before in the past, who came unabashedly to be able to help in this situation. This situation is a situation that the city of Detroit work on a daily basis. This is not a fly-by-night situation. It's about love and compassion, as the deputy mayor said. I saw this mayor wrap his arms around his family when no cameras was around, when the spotlight wasn't there. The way he embraced his family and looked his family in their eyes and said that, hey, I'm sorry what happened, and we will be there with you until you need us no more and some. I was moved. I've been moved by this deputy mayor who have stepped up to the plate on a daily basis, cried with his family, tears, real tears, crocodile tears, to say, hey, I am with you. And the level of compassion from the citizens of the city of Detroit has been overwhelming, and this is what Detroit looks like.
Thank you so much.
Question this may be for Chief Bedison. I know that it's a tragedy, but I know that there was a police investigation. Where does that stand, which would lead to, if that is still open, to my next question, Chief, what impact, if any, does this administrative review have on the police investigation?
They're separate, and so I don't have the report back from the medical examiner's office, so I can't even tell you cause of death at this particular point. And so the investigation remains open, and at some point in time, depending on the medical examiner's report that determines cause of death, I'll be able to go from there.
Okay. Might these findings play a factor or role?
No. No. Any other questions?
I want to be clear on that. Those questions need to be directed to the prosecutor's office. Nobody here has any role in deciding how things are pursued. Go ahead.
Julia Cardi, the Detroit News. First of all, for the recommendations that are measurable, like making sure CAM calls people back, requiring site visits when there are children involved, is there going to be any kind of official monitoring or reporting required to make sure that these things are being done?
We are working with HAND and CAM and the COC on reporting. We'll continue to do that. I think the high-level answer is yes, but we are still talking about people experiencing housing crises who are sharing information that's private, and so we have to balance public accountability as well as privacy concerns as well.
There is no difficulty doing the review. The Housing Department has the data from every single phone call, disposition, when outreach workers were ordered. They will be reviewing on an ongoing basis, and that information is readily available to them.
Thank you. So I also have another clarification question on the after hours outreach line that is now available. My understanding is that the city came to an agreement with the Motor City Mitten Mission to be taking calls after hours for outreach. Is that what you're referring to, or is this something additional?
Motor City Mitten Mission is currently providing that after-hours support. That contract is in place on an emergency basis. We're also going through a procurement process for longer-term support.
Thank you. And one more question. For on the issue of people who are living in their cars, is there currently a mechanism for outreach teams, whether who work for the city or other teams, to access private parking structures to check for people who may be staying in them? And if not, could there be some kind of a mechanism for that sort of access put in place?
It's a parking structure, and so our neighborhood police officers will reach out to all of the parking structures, identify them, and I'm 100% positive that they will not deny us as the police department, and with our outreach, the opportunity, and we're going to solicit them as well to work with us. And so most parking structures have security officers, and so we will work to ensure that they know what they're looking for too. So it'll be a cooperative thing.
And would there be any sort of mechanism for access by outreach workers who don't work for the city, but, for example, are contracted by the city, or have contracts, I should say?
I'll update you later with that, or it's a continuing thing. And so, but the primary response right now that I can answer is what we'll do as a police department and the ones that do work for the city, and we'll invite and have training sessions for the security parking lot attendants and the garage attendants so that we can have access. And like what's already been stated, the outpouring to support the unsheltered population in this community has been overwhelming, and so I just can't imagine them not working with us.
Thank you.
And we've got two questions now on the 24-hour line, so let me make sure everybody fully understands exactly what happens. When you call up until 6 o'clock, you get the traditional CAM network. After 6 o'clock and weekends, the calls go directly to the outreach teams. We'll have two teams on the street at all times. So what the emergency calls at night do is go directly to the outreach team to immediately address an unsheltered individual. Okay, what's next?
Ed White from the Associated Press. Mayor, it was said just moments ago that you met with Miss Williams and the family. Can you talk about that? When was that, and what did you tell her?
It was a private conversation. I met with them 2 days before the funeral at the funeral home with Ms. Williams and her mom, and it was a very emotional, difficult meeting. And the one thing I will share was they were deeply appreciative that it was done without cameras or photographers. It was a personal conversation between me and them, and it'll stay that way.
Was it, an apology, or did you tell them that you felt the city?
I told them the entire city shared their pain, and beyond that, I don't. Again, it was a conversation between us.
I don't know who want to address this, but Charlie LaDuff had posted video outside of a women's and children's shelter, said it was not authorized for occupation.
Yeah.
He showed a child on the floor.
It's
Can someone address that?
It's a bunch of nonsense.
And what that is?
It's a bunch of nonsense.
So that shelter is okay?
Again, they are going through. They have a temporary license. They're going through their permanent license. The zoning board just approved them. But anyway, I'm not addressing that kind of a report.
Okay. And finally, was there any repercussions, discipline at all, for how city staff handled Miss Williams and her family back in November and subsequently?
No, we're not looking for an individual scapegoat. We're looking to fix the system. And we put a system in place that did not communicate to a family that needed it most, and all of us, I think, feel like we share that responsibility.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you all.